Welcome, folks, to Hank and Darla's Paranormal Roundtable. Tonight, it's going to be the first video in a series that we're calling Human Monsters. And we've picked the stories by who we think were the most despicable people on this planet. And they are despicable. So, let's get it started. Darla, you want to go ahead and start our first story?
Yes. So, I don't know if you guys have heard about Delphine Lalaurie. Basically, Lalaurie was a cruel slave owner back in... So, trying to think of the best way to start this. Bear with me. So Lalaurie was born on April 10th, 1834. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, which Lalaurie I thought was French when I first had read about this. But she was born in New Orleans. She was born to wealthy parents, but she wasn't known in the community other than being a slave owner, and she was married 3 times to 3 different wealthy men.
Well, everyone was slave owners back then, weren't they?
True, especially New Orleans, I guess. But she was known to brutalize her slaves, and just back in that time, nobody had ever thought to look into the cases and to look into how she mistreated her slaves, because everybody, it wasn't something that police got involved in back then, because there was more than just one person doing it, and we're talking the 1800s. So basically, she had a young slave girl, and this is the first instance that was known as her being this brutal slave owner. So 1833, she chased a small enslaved girl to her death, basically. So this girl was combing her hair, and she tugged on Lalaurie's hair too hard, and the little girl took off. And because she was scared, they're saying that she was scared off the roof, that maybe she was escaping Lalaurie's torture, so she jumped herself. Others say that Lalaurie pushed her, but I don't believe that, because after you hear what Lalaurie did to the other slaves, she wouldn't have ended somebody's lives that fast. She would have kept them, and she was going to beat the girl. So I believe that the girl jumped to her death on her own.
She was a real piece of shit, I'll tell you that.
She was. So there had come up there was an investigation done after that, but nothing came of it. So she wound up getting her slaves brought back to her, because they had kind of taken them away during this investigation. Slaves wound up going back to her, so she built an attic at the top of her house. And you'll see pictures, so I'm trying to go with this. But she wound up building an attic of her own, and that was her torture chamber where she kept the slaves. And let's see, so there was a fire. So it was April 1834. I'm trying to do the math in my head for when she was born, how old she was for when she was found. So there was a fire in April 1834 where a slave woman at the age of 70 years old was chained to Lalaurie's stove, and she set the house on fire to escape Lalaurie's torture. So as the police came in, they found this woman chained to the stove, and this woman led them to the attic where the rest of the slaves were all kept. They found 7 slaves chained with spiked collars around their necks. And then the horror that they found out after that is what we're going to talk about. We're going to go through the different things that she does. So now we're giving you an out to leave this if you're squeamish, because the things that she did to these people are pretty grotesque.
Inhuman.
So, among some of the things, I'm just going to name off some of the things that she did. So some of the people that were found had drilled holes in their heads, and some of them had a wooden spoon stuck in it, where she was stirring the brains of her slaves while they were alive. One man had a hole in his head and he was alive, and he had maggots just crawling in it. apparently she hated the men more than the women, so they say that the acts done to the men were worse, but some of the things that she did to the women were, I mean, just as cruel. So another woman they had found, she liked to disembowel them, so she would chain them up and disembowel them.
Oh, hell no.
Wrap their intestines around their waist. And she would just leave them hung like that until...
While they're still alive.
Yes. And then, so during, I believe it was 1840s, after the fire, when LaLaurie had escaped, they were doing a renovation on the home because the fire had destroyed certain quarters of the house.
So she escaped New Orleans after the public found the fire and found the slaves shackled up in the...
So from what I understood, they never saw her ever again, but there was a death certificate in France of LaLaurie years later, but there was no documentation of her ever being alive anywhere. It was just a death certificate that they had found. But when they were doing the renovation after the fire, they found bodies of slaves buried under the floorboards alive, and there was also babies' bodies. So she had buried these slaves. She murdered hundreds of slaves. So I think she just kind of ran out of places to put them. So she's thinking, how can I torture them but also hide their bodies? Well, I'm going to stuff them under the floorboard or bury them outside alive.
What kind of evil is this? She had to be possessed. Something was wrong with her.
Yeah, the things that she did, she would break bones of people to where they looked like crabs. So she would dislocate their bones and contort them in a way to where they were like human crabs or caterpillars walking around. Their flesh would be filleted, their eyeballs would be gouged out, they would have their feces stuffed in their mouths and their mouth sewn shut. I mean, just anything that you could think of, she was doing. Apparently she put spiked collars on their necks, and the spikes were on the inside. So every time the person that was wearing the collar would breathe, the spikes would push into them. So eventually it would kill them slowly just from breathing. Nobody knows why she did it. I mean, back in the day, obviously, there was prejudice to a level of, to just a harsh level. But to do that to another human being, it doesn't matter, racism, prejudice, there's some hatred there. Like, what?
Deep-seated hatred.
Why? But nobody ever knew why. She was born into a wealthy family, and she just did these things. She was never caught. She never went to prison. There was never justice for any of these.
Well, she's serving justice right now, I guarantee you.
And her house does still stand. And on the 3rd floor, there's a window that's cemented, where that's the window that the little girl jumped out of. So LaLaurie had it cemented, and that window is still there today. So the mansion is still up. It's of course been renovated, but I believe there's a museum there now, and it's said to be haunted. Nicolas Cage actually bought the mansion. I don't remember what year it was, but Nicolas Cage bought the mansion to kind of get a feel for creepiness as he was writing a horror novel for his next movie that he was going to make. But he didn't live there longer than a month. He sold it, and the story was never made. So.
That's just wicked. Totally wicked. And I know this video might seem insensitive, but it is a video to show everyone out there that there's truly monsters back then, and there's truly monsters right now. And bringing this to the light, because I don't think a lot of people know about this lady. it doesn't serve any purpose to bring it to light except to show the evil that was and is in this world. That is a horrible story, and I hear tomorrow is going to be worse. The
Yes.
next video.
Tomorrow we have another story, and I think we're doing, how many? 3 or 4?
Just till we run out.
We're just going to keep doing them, and actually the one that we got tomorrow, one of you sent us. So if you have any fascinating, well, I shouldn't say fascinating, that's not the word to use, but if you have any stories or real life monsters, you know, human monsters, send them to us, because we want to talk about it. We want to bring this stuff to light, because this is stuff that, you know, is cruel. It's people should know. People should be aware of just how evil people can truly be.
Don't let your guard down, okay? Not everybody out there is evil, but there's a lot of people out there that have no good intentions towards you. So, our next video on human monsters, tell me a little bit about what it's about.
So our next video is, it's called the Russian sleep experiment, which is just what they called it. It's basically some prisoners of war. It was done by the Russians back in the 1940s. That's not the politically correct way to say. Soviet Union or Nazis, they were the ones
that... Yeah, they were the Soviet Union back then.
They, basically, they wanted to see what it would be like to keep these prisoners of war in a chamber and pump their system with a gas and keep them awake for 30 days.
They were trying for 100 days.
Mm-hmm. But they didn't even make it past 16 days. I mean...
That's enough.
It's pretty... We'll get there.
Yeah, it's wicked. It really is. It's wicked. But, thanks for looking in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. And we will see you next video. Thanks.
Thank you.